It is like a Jedi mind trick for your relationship.
Love Goes Quantum on an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. We can influence another's energy.
Oh, completely.
As we sit down with Dr. Laura Berman.
When you start to learn to move your body into the energetic frequency of that which you would feel if what you wanted to happen happened, that's when the magic starts to occur.
In a discussion centered around our emotional frequencies.
If you can be in those higher frequency states 51% of the time, everything in your life will change for the better.
Ascending and acclimating to the new earth.
Your system is being yanked up to a higher frequency, but you've got to kind of catch up with it.
All while facing unimaginable grief.
Grief is actually a tremendous portal of transformation. And that has been, I would not trade Sammy for it. I wouldn't trade my son for it, but that has been an unexpected gift.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Dr. Laura. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so honored to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about this whole concept of quantum love. Now, we've talked a lot about on the show of the big quantum shifts that are happening with changing consciousness and people just really awakening and expanding and seeking more. But I've actually never explored the idea of how love works into that. And I know that is one of the biggest guiding forces that we are all here in life to explore, is feel love, to be loved, to experience love, whether that's romantic, parental, friendship, all of the above. So I'm really interested to see, how love is guiding us. And you are the expert in this. And what does quantum love mean?
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's just start with the biggest question, right? I like it. Quantum love, and that's the title of my last book. Quantum love is really all about how to harness your body's energetic frequency in service to creating or manifesting the love life that you most desire. And it's based, on the principles of quantum physics. We can get into how I discovered this. I'm a therapist of 30 years, and I spent most of the first 20 years of my career working in what I now call the logistical field as opposed to the quantum field, which is very important, right? So in the logistical field would be things like how you communicate and your body image and your inhibitions and being able to communicate your needs in a relationship and your triggers and your shadows and your traumas and your dramas that are coming out and playing out in your relationship. So all of that is super important. And I still obviously really emphasize that. But there is another level of work that I didn't really discover until about 12 to 15 years ago, which is the quantum realm, right? And what was so empowering to me about that as a clinician, not to mention as a woman, is that for most of my career, if I was going to really do effective couples therapy with people, ideally, I really needed both of them to come in. Like I could maybe work with one of you for a while and do my best to kind of indirectly address the issues with the other one, or eventually convince the other one to come in and maybe hopefully engage them in the process. But there was only so far I could go. With quantum love, it only takes one person. So I can change everything in a relationship by just working with one of you. Because, just as a basic premise of quantum, reality, is that we can only perceive what our five senses show us, right? That's how our brains work. And we're actually taking in 40 billion bits of information into our brains every millisecond, but only consciously processing 2,000 of those 40 billion bits. So that I only say that to preface this next point, which is that even though it doesn't seem this way according to our five senses, everything we see around us, including ourselves, so, the screen we're looking at, the chair we're sitting on, our bodies, everything is pure vibrating energy. We're pure atomic vibrating atoms. We seem solid, we seem stable, but we're all vibrating. And in particular, our bodies are vibrating constantly, holding an energetic frequency. So if you think of like an old-fashioned radio dial, you have the volume and the station, right? And that's how it works with our body's energy. It's constantly shifting and changing based on two key things. One, our thoughts and our feelings, conscious and unconscious. And two, how likely we are to what they call in quantum physics, entrain to the people around us. So otherwise known as how codependent you are, how much of a people pleaser you are, how much of an empath you are. That will determine to what extent you are going around the world matching everybody else's frequency. Because what happens is, in order for us even to be able to perceive each other, for you and I to be having this conversation, and for every single person watching or listening to this, the only way we can perceive each other as even existing, much less having this conversation, is if our energies are vibrating in harmony with each other. So that's really important to know, because there's a whole universe going on around you that is vibrating much higher than you that you're not perceiving, and much lower than you, way out of your range, right? And so what we end up doing when we come together, until you get conscious of this and start practicing quantum love, what we end up doing is that we're like tuning forks. You strike one tuning fork and the other tuning fork immediately, matches that frequency. That's what our bodies do. So when we're in a group of people, like let's say you're at a cocktail party or a business meeting or whatever, everyone in that room is kind of finding the happy medium, right? They're all matching each other's frequencies. And if you're more codependent or more of a people pleaser, then you're just unconsciously matching everyone around you, rather than being the set point, being the one that everybody else matches. And so this applies to all areas of life, but most specifically relationships. And we can get into how, but I'll stop talking for a minute.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's totally, it's so fascinating because, there is a lot of talk about being an empath or, our energy, and like how our energy doesn't lie. But you're saying that we can influence another's energy. And that's where I think is really interesting.
Completely.
Like, so we can do all this work on ourselves, and we could be that one in a room full of people that raises that energy. But if you're that powerful, if you're that much of an empath and you're that in tune with your energy, how do you guard your energy so that you can bring it up to that frequency and have everyone rise to you?
Well, there's two parts to answering that question, right? One is, being an empath does not necessarily mean you have a high frequency. It means that you attune to and tend to match everybody else's energy, and you feel everybody else's energy. What you do with that information is up to you. How you respond to that, how much you allow yourself to be dragged down or pulled up or pulled all around, is part of the boundaries that I think you're asking about, which we can talk about. But really what comes first is, there's strategies we can put in place, but it's really about doing your own work to raise your own frequency, so that, and the way that occurs is literally through healing. So the more, if you look, and I get into this in quantum love, and listen, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I didn't invent the science. I just applied the science to love, and it works insanely well. And to your point, it is like a Jedi mind trick for your relationship. So when I first discovered it, it was out of desperation. And, I can tell you the story later if you want to hear it of how, and I talk about it in the book. But basically I did it for my kids, because my kids one was suicidal, one was having panic attacks, like our family was in crisis, and I couldn't, all my usual therapist mama tricks of neuropsych assessments and therapy and even medication and stuff, none of that was working. And what I ended up stumbling upon and discovering was what ultimately became quantum love. But when I started using some of the basic principles I was trying to figure out, it immediately changed my kids when I changed what was going on internally in me, not just what I was pretending, but what was really internally going on. Because, for instance, there is, I talk about something called the quantum love map, right? And basically, every emotional state we hold, consciously and unconsciously, has an energetic frequency and creates an energetic frequency in our body. And the lower that energetic frequency is, the denser, you think of it as kind of heavier and denser and slower your energy is, and the less of what you want to manifest, or the less yummy stuff is matching you. So you're perceiving less of that in the world around you. The people around you are matching where you are energetically. So the lowest frequency emotion, and there are scientists, one in particular named David Hawkins, who wrote a groundbreaking book called Power versus Force. He was a kinesiologist and a researcher, and he went around the world with 1 million different fields of studies and experts, and they collaborated and were able to calibrate the energetic frequency of different emotional states. Shame, lowest possible frequency state your body can hold. Highest is love and bliss, right? And so there's a continuum, right? Of shame, then guilt, anger, resentment, frustration, jealousy, right? These are all kind of in what I call ego frequency. We have those states. We're human. But when we're in those states, our energetic frequency we are not creating the results we want. We're not creating the reactions in other people. I'm not even talking about in the logistical field. I mean, just energetically, right? And there's a tipping point where we get to curiosity and openness. So anything from curiosity and openness to forgiveness, compassion, love, understanding, all of those, and obviously bliss and all those, high frequencies that most of us don't sustain for very long, right? Anything above curiosity and openness, is the tipping point where you start to move into the quantum love zone. And so if you can start to authentically, I don't mean like, I'm just going to tell myself I'm fabulous when I really feel like crap about myself. But like if you can hold those higher frequencies authentically, meaning you're working through whatever your triggers are, you're working through your stories that are holding you down, you're healing your past traumas, you're addressing your depression or anxiety, you're looking at your shadows, right? If you can be in those higher frequency states 51% of the time, everything in your life will change for the better. And you can start to apply this in a more isolated way before you get to that point where, like, for instance, if you're going in to give a talk, right? Or even before I got on the line with you, it's just you and me, but hopefully lots of people are listening to this. So we're energetically reaching them as well. You are all in training to me right now because I moved myself into the energetic frequency of love and peace and compassion, because that's what I want all of you to feel. And you just automatically, unless you work against me, which you certainly can do if you're conscious of it, but you're automatically in training to me. So, before you have a conversation with your partner, before you walk into the room with your kids, before you walk into that talk, when you start to learn to move your body into the energetic frequency of that which you would feel if what you wanted to happen happened, that's when the magic starts to occur. So that's the formula, right? What is it that I want to manifest? I want my partner to be more romantic, or I want to find love, or I want to stop fighting, or I want them to spend more time, whatever, pick your thing. The next question is, how would I feel if that were true? And my partner was showing up exactly how I want, or I was waking up every day next to the person who is perfect for me, how would I feel What feeling state? Would it be playful? Would it be cherished? Would it be safe? Would it be adventurous? Would it be desired? How would I feel? And then and what I teach in Quantum Love is how to move your system into the energetic frequency of that feeling you most desire. And then that is the secret behind the secret. That is what manifests what you most desire. And that is what the people around you will match. And that is the frequency of people that you will call in and attract in, whether it's colleagues, friends, partners, whatever. As you hold that energetic state that you most desire to live from, everything starts to match you there.
I have so many questions. My mind is going a million miles a minute right now.
Yeah.
So how do we get to that place of genuine feeling? I've talked about that a lot on this show. Our feelings, our emotions, our energy, it doesn't lie. We cannot manufacture those.
No.
So to feel it so that you can attract it in, how do you get to that place of genuine feeling? Because if you're not naturally there, that's a challenge. I know even like when you're talking about your children, I see it. I walk into a room and my children are like matching whatever I'm feeling, whether I want them to or not. And they're really little, so they have no filters. It's just like immediate. And so it's kind of like, how do we curate that more so than just saying, I'm going to set the intention that I'm going to be happy? Like, how do we make that natural and genuine?
Okay. So there's two pieces to answer that question. The first is the temporary Band-Aid fix, which is worth using until you get the permanent fix, right? And I'll talk about both. But I guess my point is that until you actually address the things that are making you unhappy or making you insecure, or the trauma and the insecurities or the inadequacies or the low self-worth or all those things so many, all of us carry with us, until you have adequately addressed that, it is going to be a Band-Aid approach. Okay. But when you start to add it, and that doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it means you have to keep consciously doing that. And it's more of a, forceful kind of intentional strategy versus a way of living, if that makes sense. So so let's just answer the strategy, right? Here is how you move. It's a very simple, and I have if you go to my website, I have, if you go to the Quantum Love page of drlauraberman.com, I have tons of meditations, including how to move into these states. But basically what you do is you ground yourself, and we can talk about how to do that. Then you move in your mind, because you have to ground your energy before you can do this, or it won't work. And then you move in your mind's eye. You imagine, so let's say, you want to feel peaceful, or you want to feel playful, or you want to feel open-hearted, or whatever. You go in your mind and you think of a time in your life, real or imagined, could be with your pet, could be with your friends, doesn't matter. Think of a time in your life when you've had that feeling, or make one up. If you've never, like, let's say you want to be playful and you've never had a playful relationship, and you think, okay, what would be a playful scenario with a lover? Oh, we would be having a naked pillow fight. Like, I'm just pulling that out of my butt. There's an example, right? And so then you go in your mind's eye, in your imagination, and this is key. You don't see yourself in that scenario. You are in it in first person. So you look down and you can see your hands holding the pillow. You can feel the whoosh of the air as the pillow, hits your partner. You imagine employing all your senses, right? If you want to just move into the frequency of love, you think about, like, when was a time in my life? I mean, this is if you just want an easy cheat to move into the quantum love zone. Think about, what is a time in my life where I felt pure, unadulterated, all is right in the world love? Like, could have been when you got to the top of a mountain you were climbing, or when you held your baby for the first time, or whatever, right? Whatever. There's no wrong answer. It could be many of them. But you do the same thing. You move your in your imagination as if you can see the baby in your arms, you can feel it, you imagine all of your senses, what that does, because the brain and the body cannot tell the difference. And I spell out all the signs for why. Cannot tell the difference between reality and rehearsal. But it has to be in first person in your mind. And then it gets internalized. Your body thinks it's real and it moves you, and you will feel it in your system what the energy of that feeling you've now imagined is like in your body. And you are now in that energetic frequency. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So how do we sustain that? Because I can do that on a dime with you right now. I can go there very easily. But how do I get up from my chair and walk into the other room and not be pulled down by someone else? Or how do I, continue that feeling past that dream state that you're creating for yourself?
Well, so it's not, unless you tend to be really easily triggered, it's not that easily dropped, I guess. I mean, if you go and have a huge fight with your partner, or you end up getting sucked into a work drama, like, yeah, of course that will happen. But if you just walk out of the room, you're still in that energetic frequency, especially if you hold the intention to hold it. I know you're asking me a question and you want me to answer how to protect your energetic field, and I will get to that. But that's more of a Band-Aid, and we can talk about that. But what I would rather have you do, instead of putting bubbles around you and protections and all of that, is just to be able to move in the world like a normal human with all the bullshit around you, and hold your own, right? So the best way I found to do this, and I describe this in Quantum Love as well, and I also have some guided meditations as part of a ebook I just put out called "You're Not Crazy, You're Just Ascending," but it has all these. It has what I call the Quantum Love Biofeedback meditation, and I'll tell you how it works. It's basically you do what I just described, okay. Mm-hmm. And then while you're sitting there, and just take like 5 or 10 minutes a day to do this. So move yourself into the quantum love zone, even just by thinking maybe something specific, a feeling state you specifically want to manifest for the day, or maybe just all is right in the world, right? And you move yourself into that state, and you feel what that feels like in your body, and you marinate in that for a few minutes, and you continue to breathe. And then you move your thoughts to something that stresses you out, which will be super easy because there's probably 10 things on your list. And you start thinking about that, and you will feel the constriction. You will feel the difference after you've been marinating for a few minutes in the feeling state you want. Okay, so now you're in constriction. Now you're in fear or anger or control or whatever. Okay, back to the quantum love zone, back in my mind to that scene again, breathing into, maybe I need to ground myself again first because I got a little freaked out there. All right, now I'm going to move back into that state. Okay, I'm in that state. I'm going to marinate in this state for 3 minutes. And now I'm going to think about something stressful again. So what you are teaching your body to do is be pulled out. There's two things. One, you're teaching your system how to be pulled out of home frequency to ego frequency and move back to home frequency. So it's becomes a well-worn pathway. But also you start to learn, because I discovered this through doing this in my own life and practicing. And then once I figured out as much as I could for myself, I started teaching other people. And so I came up with this biofeedback thing because of exactly what you're saying. I would just be yanked out of it, right? And what I discovered, and what has remained true, is that when you do this biofeedback thing, even if for like 10 days, every day for 10 minutes, you do this exercise, and you don't have to time it perfectly and look at a clock, but maybe 4 rounds of in and out of home frequency. What happens is your body now naturally knows how to move in. It already knows how to move into the stress, but it naturally knows how to move into home frequency, right? So often, if I'm just walking into a meeting or walking into a room where I know people are I'm not sure how it's going to go, I don't have time or think about an intention. I just know I just like move my body into that energetic state because it knows how to go there. And that's what this biofeedback thing teaches you, so that you can start to naturally set the frequency, come back to the frequency. Now, it's if it's big triggers or there are deep wounds there or traumas from your past, then, you may be yanked out. It may not be that easy to come back, but you can leave the room. You can find a quiet place. You can listen to some high frequency music. You can ground yourself and move back there. And in the beginning, depending on how stressed you tend to move through the world, it may be that several times a day. I mean, one of the things I advise and that I did in the beginning is I had sticky notes all over my house and in my car and on my bathroom mirror that just said ground, that would remind me how to just come back into my body, come be here energetically so that I could even know how I was feeling minute to minute, because most of us are walking around the world not even in our bodies.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. Are we not in our bodies? Is that's what taking us out, and you're just calling yourself back in so that you can be in that solid state of presence.
That's step one. That's the bare minimum of how to manage the energies around you. And then, so you're, in the way, just quickly I have grounding meditations you can follow, but basically it's a matter of just taking a few minutes, taking really deep breaths. And as you breathe in, you imagine a beautiful light, any color that comes to you. It's actually really interesting because different days and maybe different colors. As you breathe in, it flows in through the top of your head, and it fills every cell in your body. And you may, hold your breath for a second while it kind of spreads through. And as you breathe out, you imagine the light shooting out your tailbone deep, deep, deep into the earth, grounding you there. So you just take several, 5 or 6 breaths like that, and you will notice a settling in your hips, like a heaviness in your hips. You'll come back into your body. And then you can move to a higher frequency state, or you can move back into the quantum love zone or whatever it is. But if you just take 3 grounding breaths, repeatedly throughout the day, you will start once again training your system. Oh, it's safe to be in my body. Even though when I was 6, I started leaving it because of all the trauma and the things I couldn't be with in order to survive my childhood. Now I can be back in here, and I'm more in control, and I'm more attuned to what I'm even feeling moment to moment and how my circumstances around me and the people around me are affecting me. And I can manage that more.
So we're essentially just rewiring the way our brain works to respond more in that loving way, as opposed to going to what's natural, the natural state that a majority of us probably live in, which is that stressful lower frequency, because that is just really kind of, I think, where a lot of us have found ourselves. But I also feel like you said something interesting a little bit ago, is that, your newest book, You're Not Crazy, You're Just Ascending. We are starting to experience these higher frequencies as we are all ascending, and it's unsettling. So, because it's unknown, whether it's a good,
it's intense.
Yeah, it could be a good feeling. Maybe we're moving into that more loving state, but it's like talking about energy or frequencies.
Is really tough.
Yeah.
Well, so here's what's happening. Remember what I said, the more healing you do, the higher your frequency becomes. And that's historically the way we as human beings were operating, right? Our frequency would naturally become lighter and higher and faster as we dropped some of the dense thought forms and insecurities and traumas and shadows and healed those, authentically dropped. Your system naturally drops them and your frequency rises. And other things like breath work will raise your frequency, and sound baths and things like yoga, that will all raise your frequency. Yeah. Okay. So what's happened on the planet since 2019, and I get into the minutia, I won't do it here, but there's astrological things happening, the poles have shifted. The Schumann resonance of the earth is the electromagnetic field of the earth has spiked and sustained the spike. So what has happened is that instead of doing our work and gradually raising our frequencies, the whole human race, because you know what I said about how we entrain to each other? The only, what doesn't entrain to us is nature and the planet. We entrain to Mama Earth. She does not entrain to us. We are always matching her frequency as our baseline, right? So as the Earth's frequency has drastically risen, we have been yanked up to a higher frequency. So instead of gradually addressing the issues and rising naturally, we are yanked up because, many of the masters and guides are saying that it's time. Like the planet is in peril and tough shit, guys. We're yanking your asses up, And so we're yanked up to a higher frequency, but then in order to be there, because we don't have a choice but to be there because it's the frequency of the earth, we're having to face all our shit, and there's all kinds of stuff. So we are hearing buzzing hearing buzzing in our ears. We're having heart palpitations. Our coping mechanisms that we've always used to deal with those difficult relatives or relationships no longer work. Food that we used to like, we don't like. Alcohol and drugs that we may have enjoyed taking before, we no longer really serve us or they make us feel sick. All of these old traumas or memories will start coming to the surface. So it feels like you're literally going insane. You're not. What's happening is that your system is being yanked up to a higher frequency that's totally going to serve you, but you've got to kind of catch up with it. And that's what the book is about. It's basically a toolkit for doing that work that will raise your frequency in general, if you want to live in that quantum love zone, but also that will help sustain you through this transition that the whole human race is going through.
That's so fascinating. It's almost like we all have like altitude sickness, like we've been pulled up so fast. We haven't acclimated as we've gone, where in the past we've acclimated more. And is that kind of why we're seeing more talk about things like mental health and wellness and things like that? Because we are going at such a fast pace up that it is bringing up so much that we are looking for outside sources to help us?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think COVID was divinely mastered as well. I mean, I think everything that's happened, and I get into all of this in that book, all of that has played a role. And, we'll know the why when we die. But what I have been told again and again by the ascended masters and by people who speak to them, as well, is that we all, every single one of us, came here at this time in human history to be here for this. And, maybe we didn't know what we were signing up for exactly, but we all signed up for it and we're all part of the plan. And, and when you look at it that way and you look at the big picture, you can start to see how a lot of this, very likely is divinely orchestrated, but it's not an easy ride, but it was time. Like, we weren't doing it on our own.
I think it's so funny that you said that, because I've had that talk before. It's like, why did I sign this soul contract? Like, who in my right mind said I would sign on the dotted line of this sometimes, when things happen and you're like, but that is true. Like, it is all divinely orchestrated. And we always, I don't know really very many things. I'm sure there's some that we look, but for the most part, we look back at any challenging time usually as a great period of life, a great growth period. Something good came out of it. And I'm not saying something traumatic, there's definitely things I'm not going to push lightly on, but for the most part, any challenge usually yields a beautiful return.
Yeah. I mean, I call those AFGEs, another frickin' growth experience, because they break you apart, they break you open. They, that's also part of our willingness to take responsibility for our own energetic frequency by doing the healing that we need to do. Because what the universe, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, will do is kind of scratch at the door. Hey, this isn't working for you. You got to leave this job, or you really need to step into your purpose, or you really need to leave this relationship that's holding you back. And, and they'll do some scratches, those niggling thoughts, but you're not listening because you're too scared of change or whatever it is. And then they'll start knocking a little harder. There'll be like a big fight or a big demotion or something that's like, okay, this, isn't working, but you still don't take action. And then the universe will say, screw you, I'm blowing the whole house up. It's time to move. You're not taking the hint. Here you go. Poof. and will blow up something, where you'll be all of a sudden get fired, or you'll find out your partner's been having an affair for 5 years or whatever, like some huge thing will happen that breaks your life apart. It doesn't have to get to that point, because the more in your body you become, the more attuned to your intuition and you become, the more in your body you are, the greater your intuition. The more in your body you are, and the more willing you are to stay in your body, the more you can listen to that intuition and attune to and hear and actually follow the messages you're getting. And then you need less and less of your world blowing up.
So it's kind of like that movie Final Destination. You can't escape it. It's what's meant to be is going to happen, and it's going to find you one way or another. Yeah. But being in your body is the key for it. So I'm curious, if our body is the antenna to our intuition, which I understand logically so much. I've been doing spiritual work, have mentors, extremely well-known spiritual mentors for long periods of time, to the point where it's like, I know all this logically, but I still find myself out of body so much, because it's like, I prefer it, I think, obviously. But if our bodies are the obviously. Antennas, that's where I think we can really harness the power of this by using Mother Earth. That's where these grounding things, why, no matter how simple it seems, are so important. And if the earth and nature is not training itself to us, then we need to use that as our tool to train ourselves easier to the frequencies. So barefoot outside, walking in nature, these things will help us, right?
Absolutely. There's so many things that will help. But the bottom line is, what you're talking about is most of us who are high, if you're a high achiever or have achieved a lot, or you're, you are someone who has either been raised by society or in your family to prize a state of being and you now live from a state of being that I call fix, manage, and control. Right. And that's how most of us operate. And that is, or it's more in the masculine, of what we would call the masculine energies, right? Of making things happen. The frequencies we're talking about are feminine frequencies. Now, I don't mean that, I'm not talking about male or female here, right? But feminine is more creative, flowing, expansive, receiving, attracting. Masculine energy is more directive and kind of powering through and strategic, right? So obviously we need both masculine and feminine energies within us, but we tend to lean one way more than the other. And, I think for you, as you were describing yourself, you are someone who spends a lot of time in fix, manage, and control. I did too. I'm a recovering type A. And so, that comes from a kind of trauma of feeling either that your life was really chaotic, or that you couldn't control things that happened around you or to you, or that it was really, really prized in your family to like go get them and achieve. That's how you got approval, and approval was confused with love, and there wasn't enough of it going around, right? So you trained your system in a beautiful, adaptive way to orient toward thinking unconsciously, this is, that I can stay safe. Emotionally, I can avoid crises. I can stay safe. Everything will be okay if I just fix, manage, and control everyone and everything around you. That is pure ego frequency. There's there's no quantum love zone there. And so anytime you are trying to fix, manage, or control something, that is your cue. You are probably out of your body, and you are probably not in the quantum love zone. And so it becomes a training process that you have to start putting your body through. And the other piece of it, which I think helps us stay in our body, and this was something that I understood and was doing, but I really have been doing on steroids over the past 2.5 or 3 years, is somatic work. Because the more you can learn to discharge the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, the grief, those things that because you're in your body, you're aware of what you're feeling. instead of leaving your body when you don't like what you're feeling or trying to fix, manage, and control away let me find a doctor, let me find a whatever, like, let me solve this problem. Instead of going there, you discharge the energy of that feeling. We've been trained to think, God, if I go to that place of despair and I let myself really feel it, I don't know if I'll come back from it. When in fact, the opposite is true. You can learn, basically, if you let yourself authentically feel whatever you're feeling, sadness, despair, anger, grief, and you let yourself fully, like, just move it through, scream into a pillow, cry hysterically, yell out the window on the freeway, whatever, beat the crap out of pillows on the, or with a baseball bat, which is one of my favorites. You are discharging it, and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and it's like a pressure valve has released, and you're back in your body, and you get this endorphin rush, and your frequency rises, and it clears the slate, like, it, temporarily. Obviously, there's one release isn't gonna, last indefinitely, right? But depending on your level of stress or how hard of a time you're going through, like when my son was killed 2.5 years ago, that was the worst pain, as you can imagine. And every single day for a year, I was doing a lot more than this, but I was doing that every single day for a year. And I still do it all the time. Anytime I'm realizing I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling immobilized, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or full of grief, or whatever, I just go, move it, and my frequency immediately rises.
So how do we go there? Like, what is the somatic work? Is it literally moving your body and feeling the emotions, or?
Well, there's lots of different ways, that lots of things that kind of fall into somatic experiencing, it's called. And if you want to find practitioners, there are 2 really good resources. I don't have anything to do with these people, personally or professionally, but I refer to them a lot. One is traumahealing.org, which is a website that where you can find a practitioner who's been trained in somatic experiencing. And one is the Hakomi Institute, which is a little more spiritual in its bend. If you're open to that and interested in that, which I know you are and your audience probably is. Mm-hmm. So Hakomi Institute is another one. Now, in terms of examples, yes, breath work is considered somatic experiencing. Mm. Dance, like I do a ton of ecstatic dance where I just put on music and I start moving my body. I start shaking my arms. I start, I walk on the earth and let myself ground that way barefoot. And I'll make sounds. Like if your body's feeling really anxious, there's a sound where you're almost like a didgeridoo. Like, so I wake up often, especially if I've been dreaming some PTS dreams about my son, I will wake up with a rock in my chest, which many of us do if we struggle with anxiety or grieving or whatever, or even just the state of the world these days. And you literally, this is just one technique, right? But you blow out your cheeks like you're blowing in a horn. And so the first step with all somatic work is that you do a body scan. So you ground, you take some deep breaths, and then you just scan your body, like almost like an old Xerox machine. And you just notice, where do I feel density? Where do I feel tightness? Where do I feel pain? Like for me, I'm attuned to it. So I know when I wake up, oh, there's the rock in my chest, right? But maybe you don't know. So you scan. And then you put all of your conscious awareness on the place that is most noticeable or strongest, right? And so just doing that after you ground and scan and just be with that. You don't have to analyze it or ask. Don't use your thinking brain. This is not thinking. Mm-hmm. Somatic experiencing is not intellectualizing or thinking. It's not talking. It's attuning, right? So you're putting all of your conscious awareness in that. So in my case, I would do it in that rock on my chest. And I would imagine what color it is. And I would just put my conscious awareness, like just sit next to it. Just put my conscious awareness and then move my thinking brain out of the way. Now, this is just my silly little personal technique, but I've taught it to others and it seems to work for them too, is that the right brain is the part of the brain that really is attuned and spiritually attuned. The left is the intellectualizer. If we wanted to make it masculine or feminine, the right is more of that manifesting feminine side, right? So as I'm sitting there putting my attention on the rock in my chest and just being with it, I imagine moving my conscious awareness from the left side of my head to my right. And I say, okay, I'm out of the way. Body, you take the lead. What do you want to do? Sometimes I want to roll around on the bed. Sometimes I want to kick and scream. Sometimes I want to cry, right? And the other thing you can do, which I will come back to now, is you blow out your cheeks and you make this sound like you're almost blowing out that really deep, and you send that sound to the area in your body where you're feeling the density. So I won't get out of bed until I alleviate the rock in my chest. Because if I do, then it's much harder. I have found I can, but I have to go find a corner somewhere. But if I do a little scan when I wake up and I notice it takes 5 minutes. I'll just breathe. I'll move into coherence, which is another quantum love and quantum physics thing, where the electromagnetic field of your brain and your heart are in synchrony. And I will be with that rock in my chest, and I'll just be lying there. I'll either move or cry, or I'll do the sound into it, and it literally breaks it up. And then once I'm like, okay, it's released. It's not there anymore. I'm not thinking, am I worried about something? Am I upset about something? I'm not using my brain in that way at all. And when I realize it's released, then I'm like, okay, I'll get up and go have my coffee now or whatever, brush my teeth. So it becomes a practice of just continually attuning to your body. And there's so many techniques, just moving your system into coherence. If you breathe in for the count of 4 and breathe out for the count of 6 for 3 minutes straight, thinking about something you love or feel gratitude for or appreciate in your mind, that will move you into energetic coherence, which is absolutely the quantum love zone. And you can do all kinds of work from there. You can move into all kinds of profound meditations. You can move into manifesting. You can just move on with your day. You've really kind of synchronized it's like a link up for your system.
So how do you reconcile such traumatic events like losing your son with knowing that there is this unconditional love? And how do you reconcile something something that holds so much grief and sadness? Like, how do you bring yourself up to that state when you go there? Because I can't imagine you can let that go.
No, you don't let it go. But so I hold it on multiple levels, right? I hold it as my baby's mother, and I have lost my child who I grew inside me and love more than life itself. And he's no longer, he's gone, and he left in a tragic, sudden way. And I've had to spend the past 2.5 years moving through and healing the trauma of that, which I have really attended to and worked hard to do. I've done the work, and I continue to do the work, but it's much less now. But, obviously it's not like it's all finished. It comes and goes. Like what's happening in the world, seeing all these dead babies in the Middle East is bringing up PTSD of finding him on the ground, like all of that and then it brings up grief, and then it brings up trauma, and I have to work through that. So, but it's not like an anvil around my neck. It's just like something I know how to work with. It's a wave I know how to ride, and I just ride it. And then it's fine. Okay. So that's like one level of understanding and of working through it. And, I've also become an unintended, I always help people as a therapist. My whole career, I would work with grief, but not in the way that I do now. And it really astounded me how few people know how to grieve and how many people are grieving. So I've really been devoting a lot of time and attention to helping people, a lot of courses, a lot of programs, helping people learn how to move through grief with grace and how to treat grief, which is the next level, is that I've discovered that grief is actually a portal. It is a tremendous portal of transformation. Talk about like jumping 12 levels in your frequency, right? If you are willing to go through it, into the pain, not around it or under it or numb it or try not to feel it, but you're willing to go into it with support, it will transform you into the most grace-filled, God-connected place. And that has been, I would not trade Sammy for it. I wouldn't trade my son for it, but that has been an unexpected gift. And then I guess I would say is the third level, is that I know enough, thank God I had done the quantum love journey and I understood. I don't even understand. I know, I don't know a lot of things, but this I know for sure, that not only are we all pure energy, but energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change form. So like the energy of which we're all made has been here from the beginning of time, from before the beginning of time. So it just changes form. So when we die, our bodies are gone, and the energy changes form, but it's still available to us. So I have learned how to communicate with him, how to feel him, what his unique vibration feels like. You can feel your children's unique vibration today. Just go sit next to them or even think about them. Each one of them has their own flavor frequency that you can feel, right? And so I know when he's here, I feel him or I call him in. And when I'm in those higher frequencies, because when we leave our bodies, we're super high frequency. And so he can't reach me and I can't reach him when I'm in a really low frequency place. But if I've had a big release or I've raised my frequency, he can meet me in the middle. And that's often when it happens, or when I'm sleeping. When we sleep, we often get visited because we're not in that conscious ego frequency state and they can reach us more easily. But they're always there. And then I would just say the final level is on the soul level. And this is something else I knew before Sammy died, because of all the work and the understanding that I'd gained, is that, and we were talking about this earlier, is that we all have a soul plan and a soul contract. Mm-hmm. And we don't know, I mean, we can guess at what that is. We can feel into what that is. We can read the Akashic records and maybe have an understanding of what it is. But the truth is, we're going to have no freaking idea until we leave these bodies and see the whole beautiful tapestry of our lives and how all the threads come together to create the picture and all the lives we've touched and all the things that happened. So all I know for sure is that he chose me as his mom and I chose him as my son. And we agreed to this shit show before we came here for what it was going to catalyze. And I know some of what it wanted to catalyze because it's already catalyzed it, but I don't know the rest of it. There's more coming. And there's levels to it. Like I know I'm supposed to be working with him and I'm not fully ready to do that yet. I'm not fully ready to step into what I'm being asked to do. But I will, so I can feel into the layers and the levels of what this journey is asking me to do and what I came here to do with it. But, I can't guess at why. We don't know why. We won't know why these tragedies happen until we are on the other side ourselves.
What are you being asked to do?
I'm being asked, I'm being asked to really step more deeply into grief work with others and I'm ready to do that. And I've been doing that. The tricky part there is like sex and love and grief are, I'm still not sure how to marry all of that, but I'm just doing all of that. But it's kind of disjointed now, right? So there's a level that I'm stepping into where I know eventually it's going to become clear how this all comes together, as everything in our life always does. But I also am being asked to really, and this is what I'm not ready to do because I still have too much of my own guilt and pain that I know is unjust, but that I have to continue to work with around his loss. And it still feels too much of a charge for me to do this yet. That's why I know I'm not ready to do it. But he is asking me to help parents and to help parents help their kids learn how to work with all of these things that we've been talking about. And I don't feel a charge around that or a need to do that yet, but I know I'm supposed to. And he's supposed to help me. And I also still, as much as I love him and attune to him and love his visitations and want them, I'm also still really mad at him. And so, and there's some resistance, which I'm not pushing too hard against because I have too much other things to do around working directly. Like, he really wants to work with me. He already is working with me and through me and the stuff I'm already doing, but he wants to really partner on this piece around parenting. And I can't even think about that yet, but I know it's coming. I just am not there yet.
I think that's one of the most important things we can do right now. And I've worked with my mentor on that, on helping attune our children to their divine self.
Yeah.
So that we aren't disconnected with it, and to bring that in. So, I mean, that's a big connection, but I completely see how love, grief, parenting, and sex all come together. I mean, It's all connected.
It is all connected. Absolutely. It's just in the, for lack of a better term, the 411, the elevator pitch, the like direction of your career. What's your thing? Grief and sex, grief and love. Like, I don't know, but I don't care. Like, I don't need to have the elevator pitch, but I'm just letting it unfold. I think one of the common denominators, which I think threads through all of it, which my heart feels called to help people with, is releasing the guilt and shame. Right? So there's guilt and shame. I mean, one of the hardest parts of grief is the guilt and shame. It doesn't matter whether it was your child or your parent or your best friend. There isn't that is, grief goes hand in hand with guilt and shame.
Grief doesn't even have to be a death. It could be grief over a relationship ending, a grief over the way a relationship is being handled.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many different
illness
components.
Or a disability that you develop or anything. Yes, and it all comes down to, it's human nature to blame ourselves. Oh, I should have called them, or I wish I had told them, or if I hadn't have done this, then I wouldn't have fallen off that mountain, or whatever it is, right? We immediately go, that's a common, and it's something that's so low frequency and so debilitating and keeps us so stuck. And it's the core of the issues we have with sex, the issues we have with love, and the issues we have with grief. So I know that's one thread. That's not the whole thing, but that is a thread that's been calling to me lately that I'm working with.
Do you think we can, as parents, help foster a system for our children so that they don't live in those negative frequencies more often, so that they are more living in these positive, the higher frequencies? And as they get older, as they get to our age, as they get to be adulthood, they don't have to work so hard to shift.
Yes. And I think that's a huge piece of it. But teaching kids how to regulate their energetic systems as well as their nervous systems, modeling that for them, normalizing it from an early age. I mean, I certainly did a lot of that with my kids, and they would, they were like, Mom, stop telling us how to, they were going to hockey tryouts. I was like, okay, let's envision you getting it in the goal and impressing the coach. They're like, stop trying to make us manifest. They would get annoyed, but it was soaking in. I think, that is really important work. And the earlier you start not only teaching them, but modeling for them so that they're watching, oh, mommy's feeling anxious. I'm going to ground myself. I'm going to, you kind of model it and normalize it. That's super helpful and important. What I'm being called to do is, yes, that, but it's even more than that. It's, as I've looked back at all the woulda, coulda, shouldas and done whatever spelunking into the dramas that were the dominoes that ultimately fell that led to my son deciding to buy drugs from someone who reached out to him on Snapchat, that weren't the drugs he thought he was getting, but was fentanyl. And that's what killed him. I am aware that there was a trajectory of bullying happening and a lack of compassion in the adults around him, not us, but in school, and most especially in children that, yes, are modeling after their parents, but also the school systems are set up this way. The families are set up this way. The kids are all being bystanders, if not bullies, right? Because they are so scared of being bullied, right? So there were so many people who felt for what Sammy was going through, but didn't dare reach out to him or socialize with him because they would then be the victim of the bullying as well. And that is, I don't blame them for that. It is, no one would want that, right? And they're just kids. They don't know how to navigate it. So like one of the messages that I've gotten is, and this is what I'm not ready to do. I mean, if someone else wants to do this, please do it. But I really think this is just like one example of it, is to create coalitions of compassion in our communities among kids, right? So you reach out to all the kids on your kids' sports teams and after school activities and in their class, and you invite the other parents and families with the kids to be part, and you start when they're young, before things are cool or not cool. So you start in like kindergarten or even preschool, and you create these coalitions of compassion with very specific strategies of how not to be a bystander, how to stand up for and with people who are being marginalized or bullied. So let's say, your daughter is being bullied on the playground in first grade by the pack leader because she doesn't have the right shoes. And she's not allowed to play the princess game with them or the witch game with them or whatever it is they're doing. And they're leaving her out. And it's now becoming this like repetitive thing. And the schools are so poorly equipped. I mean, I remember when Sammy was being bullied in a similar way, and I called the school counselor and she was like, well, I could say something to the other kids, but that'll just make it worse. Like that's what the school counselor said to me. Yeah. So, okay, so this is happening to your daughter, let's say, and it's ongoing and she's starting to not want to go to school and it's really painful for her. You can make a call. You reach out to your coalition. You say, okay, I'm making a call for compassion. Sally is, my daughter is being left out and being told, and I really, she really needs some support. So then those parents go to their daughters who are part of Sally's crew, or not even her crew, who are classmates of her, and say, okay, we've signed up for the coalition, the Compassion Coalition. It's time to, Sally's made a call for compassion. So those kids now know, because they've been trained, that tomorrow they're going to go, and when the bully doesn't want Sally to play, they'll say, we want Sally to play. Like, let's let Sally play. And when the bully says, no, Sally can't play, they say, okay, we're going to play with Sally, and we want you to play with us, but we're not playing if Sally can't play. Boom, done. Right? Like, but they don't know how to do that, and they don't start early enough. And the parents have to come together to organize it, right? I mean, that's just one example, but there's so many things like that we could implement and carry through and orchestrate that I just don't have the focus, time, or energy or heart to do right now, but is desperately needed.
Well, as parents, are we even equipped to do that? Because we have to think about it. So many of us as adults are still trying to heal that inner child, or aren't as, consciously aware of really our state of our own personal state of awareness. Some of us are 60-year-old kindergartners out there. So like this stems from the top. This seems like a big ask.
Yeah, it is. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm not ready to step into it yet, because it is a big ask, but it's necessary. We aren't going to survive. The suicide rates are higher than ever before. The drug addiction rates are higher than ever before. We are in more pain than ever before. There are so many levels to it. Social media. You want to do something else for your kids? Create a coalition when they're in preschool of like 100 kids, not just 20 or your little clique of mama friends, but like 100 kids in your community who agree We are not giving our kids smartphones. We are not letting them be on social media. We are going back to the basics, because right now, if you have a kid in 7th grade or older, while we weren't looking, social media has become completely entangled with their social survival. And if they aren't on social media, they don't know what's happening. They don't know what the gossip is. They don't know where the birthday parties are. They don't know anything. They are not in the know. They aren't in the circle. They can't socially survive without being on social media. And so if the parents don't let them on social media, they hide it with fake accounts or using their friends' computers or whatever, because that is the state of the play now. But if your kids are younger, you still have time to interrupt that, but you have to create a very wide swath of options for them so that they really feel like it's not just a few friends who they may grow out of in 3 years, right? But that there's a whole community of people who are seeing the dangers of social media that we didn't see while we weren't looking, didn't understand, and are collectively choosing something else. Like when we were young, we talked on the phone, or I went to the 7-Eleven down the street where all the kids would meet up on Saturday night and find out where the party was, right? But now it's all on social media, which is the equivalent when you let your kids on social media. I didn't understand this. When you let your kids on social media, it is now, because they don't let us protect them, it is now the equivalent of dropping your kid off in the worst dark alley in the most dangerous part of town with pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers and pedophiles, and expecting them to be able to navigate that. And we can't watch what they're doing or intervene because they can run circles around us, and because the social media platforms won't let us put on the protective devices that would allow us to protect our kids. So it is not set up. It is set up to put your kids at tremendous risk, not only of addiction to social media, addiction to the computer, because it's designed for that. The algorithms and the way it's set up is designed to get them addicted, but it also is putting them in tremendous danger of being groomed, of being hurt, and of being, approached, which is what happened with Sammy, by drug dealers.
I wonder how we change that, because there's so much money behind it. And whenever there's that much money behind something like that, it becomes near impossible to change. But even with social media, I talked to Simone Hang, who wrote the book, Let's Talk About Loneliness. And we talked about the fact that that it's actually now considered, loneliness is one of the biggest killers today. It's considered an epidemic.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And kids, teenagers, that I forget what the generation, I think Gen Z is what they call it. They don't even feel the need to have relationships outside of social media. They don't want to put themselves outside of that computer.
They don't have a template, right? They don't. Well, they don't have a template for it because they've come up with this, right? They don't understand a different way of being because there never has been. I mean, one of the things that we're doing as a family, and it actually just became a bill on Capitol Hill, is something they're calling Sammy's Law, which will require that every social media platform that has children on it allows protective software that the parents can use. So for instance, there's this software, once again, I have no affiliation with them, but there's software called Bark, which will alert or ping the parents if your child is talking about suicide or bullying or alcohol or drugs or sex, so that you can, so that when that drug dealer and Sammy were communicating, I would have been right in his room being like, okay, what is happening? What's going on? I would have interrupted and intervened, and it would have been probably a different outcome. The problem is that Snapchat, where 85% of our kids are, and TikTok, which don't even get me started on, and Instagram DMing, not Instagram itself, don't allow this software. And the reason they don't, so I had a conversation with Evan Spiegel, who is the CEO of Snapchat, and he, after Sammy died, telling him what happened and asking him two things I asked him. One is to respond to the police calls, because I had the dealers. One of his friends sent me a screenshot of the drug menu he bought the drugs from, and I had the dealer's Snapchat handle, and the police told me Snapchat won't help them. They cite privacy laws, so they wouldn't tell him who my son's killer was, even though they had all the evidence that he had been murdered. So I had two asks of Evan Spiegel. One is that he respond to the police, because the police said we don't even bother calling them because they don't return our calls. So that and I was hearing this from thousands of parents, so that he start responding to the calls and create a group of employees that were attending to that, and which he was fine doing. And the second thing was to allow protective software for parents to use on these platforms. And he would not. He said, I can't do that. And I was like, why? And he said, data privacy. Now, I didn't understand what that meant, but I later did a deeper dive and talked to the experts. And I discovered that basically Snapchat, the way they make their money on Wall Street is by how many users they have. They don't care about the safety of our kids or anything else. They care about how many kids are on their platform. The second thing is that they sell the data on our kids that they collect to advertisers. So what he didn't want to happen, and he basically explained this to me, is that if he were to allow this protective software, which they don't allow us to put on our kids' phones or apps or anything else, then the data that they're wanting to sell would just run through another program and come right back to them, right? So I even had Bark talk to them, and Bark was very clear. We're not holding this data. We're not even looking at it. It's running through our system and coming right back to you. But they're so paranoid and fixated on, the stock price and the money, that they are too scared. They don't care enough about the safety of our kids and the fact that all these kids are dying or committing suicide or, getting groomed and sexually abused. They just want control of their data. So they will not do this until they are legally required to, which is what we're trying to change, which is why it's so unsafe. It is like the dark web for kids. So they're afraid that if kids knew that their parents could put this software on and they would be monitored, that maybe they wouldn't want to be on Snapchat. And they don't want that, because they want our kids they want our kids. They're making a lot of money off of our kids and killing them while they're at it, but they're making a lot of money.
I mean, this just comes down to there's a couple things. Profit, money over people. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's across the board. That's whether we're talking about social media, we're talking about technology. I mean, we can talk about the food industry. We can talk about all the pharmaceutical industry, like all of it. It all comes down to that same thing. And I get really pissed off when I go down that road, because it makes me sick. But that also leads me to believe, like on the spiritual level, coming back to that, is like, that is such that ego-driven mentality of where we are. Like, we need to shift consciousness in that way as a mass whole, so that we can be looking more as like that unconditional love for everyone. And shouldn't we all find abundance and success and more wealth and more happiness and all these things that they're holding on for dear life with fear and control over? Shouldn't that come if we look at it from a more compassionate and unconditionally loving side?
Yeah, that's an even bigger order than what I was talking about with the kids. But amen, sister. I am 100% on board with that. And what I always come back to with the state of the world, and I see all this craziness and all this misinformation and all this division and all this anger and hatred and violence and depression and suicide and death and fentanyl poisoning and all of it, it can take you down, right? If you start thinking like, what are we going to? So I just always come back to love. I'm like, all I can do now, here's the cool thing. And this is something else that the data that David Hawkins discovered. They did all these really complex calculations, but basically one person holding the energetic frequency of love and open-heartedness actually raises and positively entrains 750,000 people who are in a place of despair, guilt, shame, anger, violence in those lower frequencies. Now, does that mean it solves all the problems of the world? No. But it means if you can just keep coming back to love, keep coming back to peace, keep coming back. And really the core of that is faith, right? Like just really softening and surrendering. I can't control all of this. All I can do is live from and hold the energy of peace and love. You will have a huge impact on the world around you. And if more of us were doing that, and they've done studies, I mean, they've had communities where they've done this in the worst part of town, where people have come together and meditated and moved into what is essentially home frequency, although they don't call it that. And crime rates dropped, and homelessness rates dropped, and addiction rates dropped. So this has been vetted and proven that this works. So if more and more of us start moving, healing our own shit, dealing with our own stuff, removing the things and releasing the things that are holding us in those lower frequencies, and hold that home frequency, that quantum love zone, 51% of the time, the whole world will change.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that stat. I didn't actually hear the numbers of it, but I heard that one person in that frequency can help have such a huge impact. So, but
Huge.
I didn't know the numbers before, but you also said, and I know we're like going way over what we're supposed to be here, but I'm really curious how faith plays a role in that, because that is another thing I've talked about a lot on the show: faith, love, all trust, all these things. And I think that is also another big missing piece into what we're experiencing in the world as a whole, and why there are so many issues with mental health, depression, anxiety. I mean, I deal with all that.
Because we don't understand how supported we are. And we are, if I could do anything over in my own childhood, it would be wishing that, there's a lot I could probably do over, but if I wish I had the model and the reinforcement of a higher power, and being supported by a higher power. And that's not necessarily organized religion, because that has its own brand of low frequency messages and scary fixed, manage, control stuff that isn't helpful. But if we could cultivate in our children and model for them faith, that we are supported, that which is right for us is always unfolding, that even when there's a bumpy ride, even when we're having, things aren't going to go perfectly or swimmingly, we're going to have hard times, we're going to have pain, we're going to have loss. You can't live and love without being willing to have your heart broken, and you will have your heart broken no matter what. I'm not saying you say all this to your kids, but that's the message, right? But everything's going to be okay. We're supported. There is so much love flowing to us and through us at all times. And the only reason we can't feel it is because we're too in our heads and too in our ego, and we don't know how to access it, right? So I have spent so much of my adult life, and I feel like I'm, really getting there now, but so much of my adult life learning and discovering how to tap in and tune into my higher power, how to have. At first, it was just a one-way relationship where I was just sharing stuff, and now it's starting to be a two-way relationship. But if you can cultivate that and model that and encourage your kids, oh, it's nighttime. Let's tune in and tap into spirit and feel the love around us. Let's feel this. Oh, you're feeling scared. Let's tap in and tune. It's not just mommy that's going to hug you and make it better. Let's call in spirit. Let's call in God, Jesus, Allah, pick your poison. I don't care. But model that for them. That makes a huge difference. That's the core of everything, because faith is believing in what you can't see, right? And when we're scared and when the world seems like it's blowing up around us, we think, oh, that little quantum wink I saw where I was thinking about, wanting to start a crocheting business, and all of a sudden I walk by a crochet store, that's looking for partnerships or whatever, that wasn't a quantum wink. That, I'm just making that up. That's just a coincidence, right? There are these messages that we're getting all the time, these synchronicities, these support, these messengers. Even someone saying, I was at an ecstatic dance thing and this random woman came up to me. I have no idea. She's like, I'm Gilda. And I said, hi, I'm Laura. And she said, can I give you a hug? And, it's ecstatic dance. Everybody's saying, I'm like, okay. And she gives me a hug. And she says, Sammy is so proud of you. Like, I don't know who this woman is. And she was just his messenger for the night that gave me a message. Now, I could have been like, oh, she looked it up online and she knows me, recognized me for my career and knows and, is just saying something nice, which is very likely true, right? But it's still a message from Sammy, right? And I can choose to, no, that was just a coincidence. That's not, or I could be like, all right, this is a moment of tremendous grace. I was really needing to hear that he's proud of me today. And here is this angel working through this woman. I'm going to accept that and honor that and claim that and say, thank you. And then our angels and guides who are always with us will be like, oh, she gets it. Let's give her more. Let's give her more. Okay, she's seeing it, right? So the more you're willing to see it, the more you're willing to lean into the miracles all around you, to the faith that you are supported, that the destination is in the GPS. You may be taking a lot of detours. There may be some car wrecks along the way, but like you are supported. Everything's going to be okay. You can relax, let go of fix, manage, and control more, move into home frequency more, surrender and soften and allow the flow of life, not block it.
It's a choice.
Yeah, it's a constant choice. It's, faith is a decision to believe in that which you can't prove. That's what faith is.
Such wonderful, wonderful information. Thank you so much. How do we get in touch with you if we want to take your courses, follow along with your journey, get all of your books, all that good stuff?
Yeah, all of it's, you can either follow me on social media. So it's all at Dr. Laura Berman. I have a YouTube channel where I do tons of videos, which is Dr. Laura Berman Official. And then if you go to my website, drlauraberman.com, you go to just click on Quantum Love, you'll find all the meditations and exercises. And also you can find on the homepage my book, You're Not Crazy, You're Just Ascending. And with the book, I think it's like $11 or something. I made it super affordable. With the book, you get I think there's like 15 guided meditations for doing shadow work, for doing that biofeedback thing, there's all that. And also interviews with ascension experts, psychics, mediums, astrologers who are so you get the book, which is kind of like a toolkit, and the meditation. I feel like that's for your audience, and what we've been talking about is probably that, and getting the book Quantum Love is probably, the most powerful advice I can give you.
Well, thank you so much. It was such an honor and a pleasure to talk to you today.
It was good talking with you too. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Dr. Laura Berman, for such a big conversation all about quantum love, learning how to ground into higher frequencies and deal with grief. If you want to get in contact with Dr. Laura, get any of her books, her meditations, or her courses, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and so much more. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.